Felicia, and I like scary movies, and I am here with the editor-in-chief of Fangoria, Phil Nobile Jr.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
It's good to be here.
So you are in town. We're in New York right now, if you don't know, and you're here for a little Fangoria signing.
Yes, every issue we've been doing these signings at Forbidden Planet.
Mm-hmm.
We come say hi to folks. Some
Yes.
guy in a smelly costume shows up at everyone.
Is that true?
That's 100%
Like
true.
a specific guy?
The same guy.
The same guy.
Yeah, I don't know his name. It's some sort of red demon thing. It smells like wet fur.
Oh no.
Don't let that put you off. It's a great time. Otherwise.
That's very funny. Yes, I went last time, and that's
Yes.
time I met you in person.
Yes, it was a great meeting.
Yeah, that's funny. So I guess I want to start a little before Fangoria, if that's okay.
Sure.
And then we'll get into all that stuff.
Yes. The 70s?
Sure.
Or
Where,
now?
the day you were born.
Wow.
When did you first start writing about horror? I guess is my
When
first
did I
question.
first start writing about horror? I'm not sure. Gosh, I have been a horror dork since I was a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it had to do with the fact that horror movies terrified me, and I couldn't. My 11th birthday, my brother took me to see American Werewolf in London. I cried and I had to leave.
Oh.
It was bad. It was very bad.
That's what siblings are for.
I saw the Thing, and I was afraid of my dog when I got home.
Oh,
like
yes.
horror movies really shook me as a kid.
Wow.
And what got me out of that was learning about how they were made, reading magazines like
Gotcha.
Fangoria and Cinefantastique and other things like that. And I guess those writers were my first models. In terms of my own writing,
Mm-hmm.
and I would dabble in like 8th grade newspaper and stuff like that, but I didn't think you could make a living at it.
Yeah.
I just found my 8th grade yearbook and I put for career psychology, because like writing, and I was writing then, but it never occurred to me that you could make a living writing about movies.
Totally.
And I didn't for a very long time. My career was more about producing nonfiction television, documentaries, everything from home improvement stuff to game shows to true crime, and
All like great things.
Sure.
Great topics.
Yeah, it was great. It paid the bills. I bought a house. It was great. But I always loved writing about movies. And when a friend of mine started a website, he invited me to contribute. And
Nice.
I said, well, what do you want me to write about? And he said, anything you want. And so...
The dream.
The dream, yeah. And so it was just a hobby on the side, and I would write reviews or essays or, long form things. And it was just a side hustle for a very long time. And when the publisher of Fangoria bought the magazine in 2017 or 2018, he reached out to me, and because I had interviewed him about his films. His name's Dallas Saunier,
Yes.
and he produced films like Bone Tomahawk and Brawl and Cell Block 99. And I interviewed him about Bone Tomahawk, and then I reviewed Brawl and Cell Block 99. And I think if I gave Brawl a bad review, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I gave Brawl a very good review. I believe I called it a misanthropic masterpiece, which...
Man, I will note that for my future videos, my friend.
You never know. You never know who's going to call at that next gig. But he called me up in January of 2018 and said, I just bought Fangoria. And I said, what'd you do that for? And he told me his grand plan about resurrecting the brand and producing films under the brand and whatnot. And but the brand was kind of a mess in 2018. It had kind of run aground and stopped publishing, and there was a lot of ill will on the internet about it, which I had kind of tapped out of. I didn't really know all of this stuff until I came on board. So we spent most of 2018 kind of rebuilding the brand and restoring faith with the audience, just with different goodwill gestures about like people had paid for subscriptions under the old ownership and didn't get their magazines, and so we gave them a free year and that kind of thing.
Just being good people.
Trying, it was smart. It was the smart thing to do. It was the right thing to do, and I think we've done a pretty good job of resurrecting the brand so far.
Absolutely.
We're not done. Lots more to come, but we're. I think where we are, we talked off camera about it being a year later, and I think a year into our first published issue, we're doing all right.
Yeah.
I think.
Happy Fangoversary.
Thank you. Fangoversary?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of something.
Yeah. It's been a ride, though. It's been a really fun ride. I've met a lot of amazing people. Barbara Crampton texted me on my birthday. Like, what?
That was going to be one of my questions. In terms of, so a year in the life, if you will, how has your life changed? I would say, I want to know, like, kind of personally from this job. Because at the end of the day, it's a job, but it's like, Fangoria is like it's huge for so many people.
Yeah.
What has this done?
I think
Who have you met, is what I'm asking.
What?
Who have you met?
Who have I met? Who haven't I met? It's been, I think, about 10% of the job has been what I expected it to be.
Wow.
And that's curating writers, editing pieces, putting an issue together, that kind of thing. It's been so much more travel than I thought it would be.
Oh.
I flew...
You're going to 5 a.m. tomorrow.
I'm going 5 a.m. tomorrow to Telluride Horror. I flew, I think, 70 times in the past year.
Oh my God.
My miles say 125,000 on them.
Wow.
So it's a lot.
I would get a lot of perks or free flights from that. All those.
You get some free flights. if it's a flight to someplace crappy, first is empty and they'll bump you up for free. That's okay.
Nice.
You know, if you're flying to the middle of nowhere.
The good life, the luxury.
Yeah. So it's a lot of travel. I'm not home a lot. Our office is in Dallas.
Yeah.
And I live outside of Philadelphia.
How does that work for you? Mostly just the traveling?
That 125,000 miles I mentioned. Yeah. I fly there, I guess, every month.
Okay.
You know, it's not a rigid schedule. With the quarterly magazine, there's a week every quarter that I have to go and be there. We just sit there and slam it together and order Thai food and stay there till midnight. You know, those are actually fun days.
I was going to say that sounds
Those are a
ideal.
lot of fun. I work with a very talented graphic designer named Ashley Detmering, and my associate producer is Jessica Safa-Vermeer, and my managing editor is Meredith Borders. And the great part is, like, after 5, 6 o'clock, and that office empties out. It's just the four of us putting the magazine together. Like
Thai food.
With Thai food. And pie. There's a pie place in Dallas that we get pies delivered from. That's the, like, weirdly, when this is all over, those nights will be, like, cherished memories for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just fun. And it's stressful, and we're cramming, and we're trying to put last minute stuff in there. But, you know, those days were cool.
I forgot to say the magazine is beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
By the way.
That's credit to those ladies, and I take a little bit of credit, but you know,
smidge.
Mostly those ladies, yeah.
I want to come back to what you're saying about resurrecting the brand a little bit. So you have this magazine that right now is only in print, right?
Right.
So we're not doing anything online, no random articles, no like quick horror news, if you will, like a lot of the sites do.
Well, you kind of just answered it in your own thing. There's so many sites doing news, and they're doing it so well. Why would we, be an also-ran in that space? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think that, you know, there's sites like Bloody Disgusting and Dread Central, aside from like trades like Deadline and Variety, and like sites like Birth Movies Death, where I used to work, they're on it. You know what I mean? And they've got it, and they are in a rhythm, and we don't have the infrastructure for that, I don't think. You know what I mean? I'd need 3 people just retyping press releases all day just to keep up with it all. And there just doesn't seem to be a need for it. I think if Fango was going to come back in an online space, it would have to justify it. It would have to be something different. It would have to, much like when we brought the magazine back, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many sort of inheritors to what Fango had been doing. You've got Rue Morgue and Horror Hound and Diabolique and the others, that we didn't want to just be another magazine. It had to be a little different and it had to set itself apart. And I think that would be true of the online space as well. So for now, we're kind of just sort of living in this sort of social media space where we've got a very robust presence on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, which I think is going really well.
Yeah.
Because I think about...
How so?
Well, I think about this probably because of YouTube, but the online horror community is how I found friends that liked horror movies. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it feels like that aspect is so important. And I feel like you guys have done a good job of having something that feels very special that you get to like go in your house and do, like alone and appreciate it. But then you also have a space online through social media to have a community.
That's interesting, because when I read Fango as a kid and there was no internet, there was all this stuff in the back, the classifieds of like, pen pals, let's hang out and watch horror movies, and there was this weird hunger for a community that you couldn't really have except for at conventions. Right. But a lot of times, to me, at conventions, again, back then, it would be like a kid in a candy store mentality. Mm-hmm. You would go to a convention and you would find posters that you never saw in your life, and books and magazines, and so you weren't really thinking community back then, although conventions have become huge spaces for horror community now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty cool, I think. And so, the internet is kind of filling that spot.
Yeah.
I've connected with a lot of really interesting, amazing people that...
I connected with you.
This is happening because of the internet.
Yeah. And so, but it's nice also to be used as a tool and not necessarily, not as everything. So it's like you have both. Yeah.
I think that as much all that good shit I just said about the internet.
Of course.
Wow. The internet is also trash, right?
Right.
It's a terrible place sometimes, and that's why you've got a nice 100-page magazine every quarter.
Yeah.
Just unplug, go sit somewhere, get your eyes off. Let your circadian rhythms or whatever reset by not staring at the screen, not staring at a glowing screen every minute of the day. When iPhone put that face, how much time you spend staring at your screen.
Oh, we don't want to know.
I don't ever want to see that.
We don't.
How do I turn that off? It's bad. Because that's literally my job. If I'm not looking at a computer screen writing or editing, I'm looking at the computer screen on social media. It's just it sucks. So the print magazine is an important part of that component.
Okay, so in terms of that social media audience from the community that we're talking about, how have you seen audiences change in the last? You can even talk about in the last year, because I feel like recently, I don't know if you're experiencing this, but recently for me, I have so many friends that have never been interested in horror that in the last couple of years are going to see horror movies.
Right.
And texting me about movies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're going to see this movie? It's sort of exciting and strange.
I've written about this before, but we're in a moment where horror is big business. Horror is part of everybody's conversation.
It's trendy.
It's gotten trendy. I hope it's not trendy, because trendy means it's going to go away.
That's a good point.
I hope it's a movement more than a moment.
Yeah.
I hope we're moving toward a place where horror is becoming more accepted, and I think obviously Jordan Peele is a huge part of that.
Absolutely.
With the 1-2 punch of Get Out and Us, it just became those were appointment viewings. You had to go see those movies.
Yes.
And I don't know that we've had, as much as I think Hereditary is pretty much a masterpiece, and as much as I really love what Ari Aster's doing and all the other guys in the space, I don't think that there's been a cultural moment like Get Out, probably in horror, probably since The Exorcist.
Wow,
you don't take my word for it because you weren't around then, but
it's true.
So, I mean, The Exorcist was
How
huge.
can you tell? Does my skin look really
You're
good?
a baby. The Exorcist was a flashpoint of cultural conversation where you had to go and you had to engage with it. And I don't think horror ever got there again until Get Out.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point, because you're right, I wasn't around for The Exorcist, but the effect in which it had on people, particularly my mother, actually.
Yes.
She snuck out of her house when she was 15 to go see it, and slept in her mother's room for the next 2 years, terrified.
It is, as far as I'm aware, the first movie I ever saw. I was at the drive-in, because you just took all the kids to the drive-in and you would put them in the back.
How old were you? Because your skin's looking pretty good too.
Well, thanks. But I have memories of that on the drive-in screen.
Oh my god.
But now I can't date that because movies played the drive-in circuit for 2 years maybe, so who knows if I saw it. I mean, it came out in Christmas, so I didn't see it
What a strange
in the winter at the drive-in. It had to be at least the next summer. But to me, it's amazing, and how lucky are we that we're trading in horror, and this is our gig and this is our job in a moment when horror is more accepted, more mainstream.
Yes.
And I don't want to say it like it's a dirty word. I think it's cool that normal people are going to see horror. I
think it's cool too, because it allows for more things to get made. Which
Yes.
means I get to watch more things.
Absolutely. And we're in a space now where other people are kind of putting hands up and saying, horror's not just naked women and slashers. We can say stuff with horror, which used to not be that unusual. Romero did it his whole career, but you've got people making really interesting statements in horror with stuff like Get Out, stuff like Hereditary. I think it does so much deep stuff with family dynamics.
Yes.
And not that the lower budget films don't have that. But sometimes these bigger events are what's needed for the mainstream to really recognize that horror is more than just blood and guts.
And to come in and then explore other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a gateway.
Yeah. And I think the next thing coming down the pike is LGBT horror. I think there's a real moment about to happen in the next year. And I'm excited about that as well.
I'm excited about that too. Speaking of that, you're such a good transitioner.
I mean, I was, but now we're here. You didn't just run with it.
I mean, you're
Go
right.
ahead.
No, you're right. So I was going to talk about your producing.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like so horror noir did very, very well. I feel like a lot of people saw that.
Horror noir did well eventually.
Yes. Okay.
I complain every chance I get about horror
I'm ready.
noir. Because
we're all ready.
Horror noir. The day Us made $100 million. Mm-hmm. They announced in the trades that J.D. Dillard, who's a black director, was going to make a remake of The Fly. Mm-hmm. And I saw that and I was like, oh, something's about to happen because of Get Out. And that was early 2017. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to my friend Ashley Blackwell, who runs a blog called Graveyard Shift Sisters, which is exclusively about black horror. and she's a brilliant writer and academic who sort of explores that space as her, at that time, her side hustle, you know? And I said, hey, is something about to happen? And she's like, I mean, I hope something's about to happen.
I hope that was the text. Is something about to happen?
Yeah, well, I took her to lunch and I said, let's talk about this. Because my background was in documentary, nonfiction stuff. Yeah. And to me, it seemed like a good idea to get a documentary about Black horror going. And she was the voice. She was the person who had to tell that story. Yeah. So with my, production experience and with her knowledge base, I thought we had a pretty good project. And then everyone said no for a whole damn year. A year of no. Netflix said no. Amazon said no. HBO said no. Hulu said no.
You heard it here.
They all said no. And then 2 weeks after I left that production company to go work for Fango, Jordan Peele won the Oscar. And the Monday after he won the Oscar, Shudder called up and said, let's do this documentary.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is a wild week you had.
It was. It was a fun week. The good news was that somebody wanted to make the documentary. We pitched a 4-part series and they said, no, give us a feature. And the bad news was I had another job. So I spent 2018 doing Fango from scratch because there was no Fango.
Yes.
And then also helping get this documentary produced.
Wow.
So it was a wild year, but the documentary was done. It came out pretty good.
Yes, it's great.
I still think there's a 4-parter in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But that story's still being told, I think. Which is
absolutely, cool. And there's always going to be more. It's like, how much can you fit into one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I had pitched it, another thing I had pitched was about sort of the story of LGBT portrayals and authorship and representation in horror, because I think that's its own interesting story. Going back to the director of Nosferatu was an openly gay director who fled Nazi Germany because of his sexuality. Yeah. And James Whale, of course, who did Bride of Frankenstein. All the way up to now, with all the peaks and valleys that go along with that story. And I partnered with a writer-director named Sam Weinman. Do you know Sam Weinman?
Not personally, but I know him from podcasts.
He's a
but
a
if
real
you want to be
presence.
my friend.
Sam is awesome. Sam went to our premiere of Horror Noir at the Egyptian in Los Angeles, and he walked out and he said he was depressed. And I was like, well, what?
Thank you so much.
And I said, well, what? He told me this later. I said, well, what were you depressed about? He said, because it ends on such a hopeful note of Get Out having happened and maybe opening the doors and maybe turning this corner. And he said, when do we get the gay Get Out? And I said, Sam, that's the documentary. That's the question.
Wow.
Like, make that the question and make that the thing that you're trying to find out through the course of this documentary. So we partnered on a pitch. Shudder is on board, and we start filming in November.
Oh, it's happening.
Oh, it's on.
Oh,
man.
it's happening.
It's happening. It's all happening. We are going to film in November, and Sam is our writer-director, and I think it's going to be a little different than Horror Noir in that Sam is going to be sort of a presence in the documentary.
Oh,
picture like the way Michael Moore sort of puts himself in the docs,
right.
but in a hotter, gay way.
Like sort of leading you through.
Yeah, it's him moving through the space, asking that question: when's the gay Get Out? While exploring the whole history at the same time.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
On that, are there any lesser known movies that you would recommend that you think are going to get talked about in that documentary?
Gosh, in the LGBT horror documentary? Yeah.
I didn't tell you we were going to talk about that, did I?
No, it's interesting that you say this though, because I just came back from Fantastic Fest. Because this is in the air, because I'm right at the forefront of these sort of things. Fantastic Fest did a whole LGBT sidebar program.
Nice.
And one of them was a film shot here in New York called Lyle.
Oh, I don't know.
And it is about a lesbian couple who move into an apartment in New York, and there's some mysterious goings on, but it's very much a riff on Rosemary's Baby. I don't want to spoil it, but it came and went in 2015 or 2014. 2014. And to me, it was interesting that this film festival was revisiting a movie that was only 5 years old, because everyone slept on it 5 years ago, but we're in this moment now where we're talking about this LGBT sort of horror thing. Another thing coming up is it's another documentary called Scream Queen, which is about Mark Patton and
Oh,
too.
yes. I haven't seen it yet, but it's out,
It's
right?
making the festival rounds.
Yes, okay.
It's excellent. And we talked to those guys for our documentary. And there's a movie that they showed there called Prey, which is a 1977 British film about a lesbian couple living in the English countryside. And this alien comes down.
Can't wait.
This alien comes down and he takes the form of a hot dude and he messes up their whole relationship dynamic.
Okay.
It's problematic as hell.
Well,
it's a very dated, very uninformed take on gay relationships. And the director gave this interview, I believe his name's Norman Warren, he gave this interview after where he said, well, you see, none of us knew what lesbians actually do. So my actresses just sort of went for it, you see. And I'm like, yeah, they went for it. There's a lesbian sex scene in this movie that is about the level of like something from Showgirls. Like where it's just this heightened, no one acts like this, what are you doing?
Oh my God.
It's crazy. So, I mean, I'm excited about the doc exploring those weird pockets of the history. It's not all going to be perfect and it's not all going to be, appropriate representation. Like to me, Angela from Sleepaway Camp is, I think ideologically a mess, right? It's not what you would call good representation, but the fact that the LGBT horror community has claimed Angela and have taken her and repurposed her and made her a trans icon of some kind. That sort of stuff is what's interesting to me to explore.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
There's I'm just throwing a recommendation at you real quick. But on the Dead Meat podcast, there's an interesting episode they did on trans representation in horror. And they have a guest whose name I have forgotten in this moment.
You're going to fly it in here later.
But yeah, it's really good. It's interesting, but it talks a lot about that, about all these movies that, even though they're incredibly problematic, they're also sort of in horror in particular, a place for people to see someone that's like, oh wait, that's something that's going on with me. I don't know.
Right.
And then being able to claim it as their own later on.
Yeah. Well, there's a scholar in the Scream Queen documentary named Andrew Scahill, and he talks about gay horror fans as scavengers. Like you take this stuff because it's what's available to you, even if it's not perfect. But think about the idea of how many horror icons are kind of the result of a straight, almost always male writer kind of misinterpreting what trans identity even means. Norman Bates, Leatherface, Angela, Buffalo Bill, Dressed to Kill. There's a whole legacy of turning like a really kind of botched, misunderstood idea of trans into like a horror boogeyman, which is kind of interesting to me in terms of just anthropologically, just tracing that history is really fascinating to me. Yeah,
that is interesting. I can't wait.
Me either. Yeah.
And also, speaking of like the problematic, there's a article in the new Fangoria that says it's called My Blu-ray Collection.
Your Blu-ray collection is problematic AF.
Yeah.
Yes. Some people have gotten upset about that article, and I think that they're kind of misunderstanding what the article is going for. To me, it starts off very satirically and says about like.
You do have to read past the first couple paragraphs, people.
Good advice
in general, especially for internet articles. If everyone could just read past the first
whole thing.
paragraph.
Man, I wrote a whole article about why Idris Elba can't play James Bond, and it was like almost no one read the article. It was really about like the racist roots of the character of James Bond, and I wasn't advocating that Idris Elba doesn't play James Bond. It was more about exploring how white imperialist Bond really is at its core and how whatever. But like no one read the article, and everyone just came from ahead.
Classic Twitter people. Classic
internet comment sections. So that article, it starts off kind of satirically about why this movie is canceled in 2019, and this movie, you can't watch this movie anymore. But some folks seem to think we were taking the position that these movies were actually in danger of being like pulled from release or canceled or whatnot, and it wasn't. It was more about a thoughtful way. How do we approach dated, problematic, potentially toxic ideologies in films in 2019. I think that there's a way to engage them. There's a way to appreciate them without, and I'm going to air quote, canceling them. Like I don't think anyone's really canceling the films, but there are people like right now, people saying I refuse to watch movie X. because of what they believe it to be representing. And I think that sticking your head in the sand in terms of art and culture is, if that's self-care or something, if you're going to be, set off by something like that's one thing. But I think the idea that you can't engage with stuff that you disagree with, or stuff that has dated or problematic points of view, which on a long enough timeline, it's all going to be that, right?
Yeah.
You're going to like Wizard of Oz doesn't treat little people very appropriately.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
But it's closing yourself off to a conversation you could have even with yourself. Just like, how do I react to this? How do I think about this?
Do you have a pet film that's problematic that you think is still has merit?
Well, when you mentioned Sleepaway Camp, I have a friend that just watched it for the first time with his roommates, and he's actually the guitar player in my band. And then he came up to me the other day, and he was just like, "It was really hard to watch." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, and he starts talking about all like the pedophile stuff, and I was just like, I understand.
Yeah.
I totally understand. But it is this weird thing where like when I watch it, I'm sort of delighted because I have like nostalgia for it. And at the same time, you just have to know like, yeah, this is extremely like was okay at this weird camp they filmed this at.
Yeah.
But wouldn't be okay to. It's also a movie. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tricky stuff going on.
Yeah, you can engage something on a campiness level.
Exactly.
But you can also, and it's more interesting to me than to just laugh at something that's outdated, but to engage it on an anthropological, historical level. I think that's history. And you've only got, in all of mankind, you've only got history recorded like that for 100 years. Before 1912 or whatever, or 1900, you don't have recorded images like that. And that we can access that stuff, to me, is like nothing short of a miracle. And maybe that speaks to my love of motion pictures in a larger sense. It's that we can have these little time machines where we can go and experience it. And I don't mean wallow in like, oh, wasn't it great when, blacks were oppressed? It's horrible.
Yeah.
But I also don't not want to see that. Yeah. I want that picture. I want to see what's going on in Gone with the Wind, and I want to contextualize it correctly, and I don't want to ban it from being shown.
Sorry.
No, please.
Because when you're thinking about oppressed people, their history is erased in a certain kind of way, right? Where it's like some of their history is not recorded in the same way that the white man is, and so it's like any bit we get to see is actually helpful information. Yeah,
even if it's not accurate. You're seeing that era's sort of point of view, or how that era sort of marginalized that person, and that lends weight to what's happening now. I think Get Out is amazing, but Get Out's more amazing if you look at it in the context of 100 years of how blacks were portrayed on screen.
Absolutely.
And that's true of any marginalized group or voice. I think it's exciting that things are turning, and that I've said this before. At my age, I don't need to hear from more white dudes my age. I want to know. I always want to know something new. I'm not rewatching movies as much as I used to. I want to see a thing I haven't seen. The clock is ticking.
Yeah.
I've only got so many more sunsets in front of me, and so I want to see the shit that I haven't seen yet, and I want to hear from the voices that I haven't heard from yet. To me, that's exciting.
Absolutely.
And this in a selfish way, not in a like performative woke. This is the right thing way. Like I want the new shit.
Yeah.
And that's been my point of view for the last few years, I think.
Which I think I can really feel in the new Fangoria as well.
Cool.
Where it's like, yes, there are things the nostalgic things that we're excited about to see in there, but most of it is a lot about new horror.
Yeah, and I think people forget that Fangoria in its golden age, let's say, which is like the 80s.
Sure.
There wasn't a whole lot of old stuff
to look at. That's such a good point.
No, but they didn't dwell. It was new releases on the cover every issue.
Yeah.
And now there's a certain faction of readers or ex-readers or would-be readers who are upset that we're not putting Freddy and Jason on the cover of Fangoria, when that's not what the old Fangoria did. Freddy and Jason were on the cover because there was a new damn Freddy and Jason movie every year, and so they were living in the now. And I want, as much as I dig my old font on the cover and stuff, I want Fango to be about what's happening right now. Are you pro nostalgia?
Am I pro nostalgia? Well, I did just go on a long journey for a VHS TV combo, which was pretty embarrassing, and I did get one. So yes, I do, and I feel nostalgic even for I mean, this is my personal stuff, but like I listened to the Emo Forever playlist on Spotify, which was like my middle school years,
Sure.
in high school, early high school years. And so I think that's just sort of in everyone's, it's like whatever you were into in your like formative years kind of stays with you a little bit.
To some degree. I think that there's also, there's a big move for nostalgia from people who weren't there the first time.
Interesting.
I think a lot of the Stranger Things fans that you see out there,
Oh, yeah.
they weren't born until the 90s, some of these folks. Yeah. So you're nostalgic for something you weren't around for. And I wonder if that's just
That's
because
like current horror fans. Wow.
there's a
That's
novelty
right.
to it, or because I feel like a grouchy old man when I kind of roll my eyes at the nostalgia stuff, but I was there in the 80s, and I remember it, you know, there was good stuff, but there was a lot of bad stuff, and there's a real kind of idealized version of the 80s being sold to the nostalgia crowd right now.
Wow. That is such a good point, because I also, as someone that is, I don't know, as old as I am, and so in a way also playing catch up, where I'm trying to like watch everything.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so there is a bit of, especially for the 80s horror movies, like as I'm working my way through different stuff, it is sort of this like, I feel like I was there, but I wasn't there.
Yeah. It's
weird.
Yeah. So I wrestle with that because I get nostalgia, I understand it, I don't want to wallow in it.
Yeah, I think that's smart.
So
But I'm keeping my VHS TV combo.
maybe I might put some stuff out on the curb if you want to come pick it up.
Oh my god.
You know,
Don't get me started.
the old VHS DVD combo that.
Oh my god, I will do it. I will come to Philly.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to throw to the world about Fango right now, or anything?
Gosh,
Before
you're
we
bringing
close
me on
it
the
up.
spot.
That's why I'm here.
Well, we just talked about nostalgia. It's interesting that our next film is a remake of Castle Freak,
Oh, right.
which is a film that a lot of 90s folks have nostalgia for. Barbara Crampton was the star back then. She's now a producer on the remake.
Oh, that's cool.
And you know, I'm speaking a little out of turn because I'm very marginally involved in the films.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I get like an EP credit, they'll send me scripts to look at and stuff, but like it's not my department, right?
Right.
But I did observe that I think Barbara was invited to go check out the filming and whatnot. We filmed it in Albania, and she was, I don't know what was expected of her, but she went there and like hands-on produced that movie for almost the entire shoot, as far as I understand it. She was
like, excuse me, everyone.
She's amazing, and she's super invested in what she does, and she's so engaged. And I think the way that she's kind of taken the pen and has written this chapter of her life is an inspiration to me.
Absolutely, and in terms of Fangoria as well.
Yeah. She's like the patron saint of the magazine, as far as I'm
awesome.
concerned. She's in every issue. She writes a column, and she's uniquely positioned to have a point of view from her level of experience and her skill level at articulating that stuff. That I think people are sleeping on the fact that like no one can be telling the story that Barbara's telling in the magazine except for Barbara.
Ugh.
So subscribe to Fangoria.
Yeah. I'll put a link and everything down in the description if you guys aren't subscribed yet. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me here.
Thanks for having me.
And have a great signing tonight, by the way.
I plan to.
Yeah. All right. Have a nice scream, y'all. See ya.